Today, the 1st of June 2021, we are honored, privileged to have the President of the Republic join us. Shall we still be upstanding for the national anthem? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, thank you. We may be seated now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the African Journalist Leaders Conference put together by the Federation of African Journalists, hosted by the Ghana Journalists Association in collaboration with the IFJ, and it's being broadcast live on the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation's networks across the country, including GTV. We are grateful that you all made it here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Reverend Dr. Francis Nyako, who is the head pastor, End Time Assemblies of God, Addo, Accra, to give us the opening prayer. Reverend Dr. Francis Nyako.
And the constraints within which we have to do our work. Bless us, O God. Bless our nations and bless our continent, Africa. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Francis Nyako, head pastor, End Time Assemblies of God, Addo, Accra. Your Excellency, with your permission, I'd like to introduce the chairman for this occasion. Our chairman is Ambassador Cabral Blay Amihie. He is a journalist, writer, and diplomat. He served as Ghana's High Commissioner to Sierra Leone between 2001 and 2005, and Ambassador to Côte d'Ivoire from 2006 to 2009. But before his transition into the world of diplomacy, he worked for 25 years in the media as a reporter, editor, columnist, publisher, and has received several awards in journalism. He was General Secretary of the Ghana Journalists Association and later a two-term president of the GJA, and is credited for the renaissance of the association. On the international scene, he served as president of the West African Journalists Association and contributed to the strengthening of journalists association in the sub-region and the struggle for democratic rule and media freedoms. He was also an executive member of both the Commonwealth Journalists Association and the International Federation of Journalists, and facilitated the opening of an IFJ regional office in Dakar, Senegal. Between 2009 and 2015, Ambassador Cabral returned to the media, this time as the chairman of the National Media Commission, Ghana's constitutional body for media regulation and defense of press freedom, and was also elected as the vice president of Akran, the network of African media regulatory bodies, in 2014. Educated at the University of Ghana, Legon, the London School of Economics, and Harvard University, Ambassador Cabral is the author of 6 books, including Fighting for Freedom, Memoirs of an African Journalist, and I Spoke for Freedom, History and Politics of Ghana Press. He is currently the Vice President of the Council on Foreign Relations, Ghana. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our chairman for the occasion, Ambassador Cabral Blay Amihir.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, Ambassador Ahmed Salah, representing the African Union, Comrade Ibrahim Ahmed Ibrahim, President of the Federation of African Journalists, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished leaders of regional and national media organizations, esteemed guests, when a fraternity you once served renders you the ultimate honor by asking you to chair an occasion such as this, where the president of the land is a special guest of honor, one's best bet is to cautiously stay within protocol and briefly say a few words of deep appreciation and gratitude. But given my previous long association with regional and international media associations, and more importantly, as a living witness too, and an active participant in the struggle for democracy and free press in my own Ghana and West Africa, I will not be doing justice to the occasion and my role if I did not say a few words beyond the customary thank you. I wish, therefore, to crave the indulgence of Your Excellency, Mr. President, and all you distinguished guests, to use the occasion to share some perspectives on where the African press is coming from, where it is now, and where it should be going. Apart from the nostalgia and pride of having been in the trenches with comrades, I can humbly state that having worked as a journalist and media activist from 1976 to 2001, I have seen so much from working under both military regimes and constitutional multi-party rule. The harrowing experiences, the changing fortunes and misfortunes of colleagues who practiced the noble profession in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, before the wind of democracy and multipartyism started blowing all over Africa, and dictators and one-party regimes tumbled and crumbled. In those decades, press freedom in most parts of Africa was under great siege, making journalists one of the most endangered species on this planet. This was not an attractive profession as it is now, with media celebrities and journalists now newsmakers in their own right. The general citizenry was not spared the suffocating grip of governments on their right to free speech. The term culture of silence was aptly coined to describe the era of unhindered governmental suppression of free press and free speech in Ghana. Governments in Africa controlled public-owned media, and this was a normal trend in the chapter of Africa's media history. That was the monopoly days of state radio, state television, state newspapers, and agencies. I recall attending an international conference in a Southern African state where the head of state defiantly told a shocked audience that private FM stations would only be allowed after over his dead body. He was right. After his death, hundreds of private FM and TV stations emerged in his country. In that era, conference of the West African Journalists Association, IFJ, and CJA became forums where harrowing tales and horrid experiences of detained journalists and publishers, closure of newspapers, and forced exiles were told. The New York-based CPJ and the Paris-based Reporter Sans Frontières, as well as the London-based Index on Censorship, had their hands full monitoring and reporting on assaults on press freedom, particularly in Africa. Even in situations where African states practice something close to democratic rule, obnoxious colonial laws such as criminal libel and licensing laws were used to muzzle free press and free expression. It is no accident of history then that conferences of the IFD passed resolutions upon resolutions calling for a return to democratic rule and a climate of press freedom and free speech. I'm happy to have lived to see that day in Ghana in 1993, in Nigeria in 1999, and from country to country all over Africa, when constitutional rule was restored. I am happy to have witnessed the advent of the internet and social media, the repeat of obnoxious laws such as the criminal libel law in August 2001 in Ghana under President Akufo. His Excellency Nana Addo Akufo, then the Minister of Justice, in spite of misgivings and doubts about the wisdom of repealing the obnoxious law from the opposition, and even some members of his own party, successfully pushed through the bill. Against this background, the restoration of democratic rule across Africa, Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I make bold at this stage to state that this must be the best time to be a journalist in Africa. This must be the best time for ordinary citizens to have their voices heard on issues of importance to them, particularly on FM stations which promote the use of local languages. This, again, I must stress, is a watershed moment for free speech and citizen journalism. But I cannot be oblivious of sporadic and unwarranted manifestations of some of the impunities of the 80s and 90s in contemporary Africa. But when and where this ugly relapse occurs anywhere in Africa, the vigilance of the media and civil society, resistance from ordinary citizens on the airwaves, followed by waves of public condemnation, always send a strong and clear message that those who dare to roll back press freedom and human rights cannot prevail and are on the wrong side of history and are condemned to Dante's Inferno even whilst on this earth. What I consider could be the golden age of press freedom in many countries in Africa has made possible by constitutional guarantees for press freedom and growing commitment of political actors to freedom, even for some, it is just a lip service. The dawn of this new era, a departure from what journalists and citizens lived with in the 80s and 90s, is best exemplified in Ghana, where the nation's 1992 constitution has created the best conditions for free speech and free press. In my view, the Ghanaian media, both public and private, are profoundly empowered to practice their chosen profession without fear or favor. Similarly, citizens of Ghana are also empowered to enjoy and exercise their inalienable right to free speech. These freedoms and rights we enjoy today are not by our might, nor by anybody's favor or grace, but through guarantees enshrined in the nation's 1992 constitution. That is the big difference between yesterday and today. And if I were a journalist today, I will exploit this freedom to the fullest without fear or favor. Going forward, there is the need for eternal vigilance to protect and consolidate the gains of the struggle. High or petty officialdom who exhibit any form of impunity against journalists must be dealt with severely by the law. Journalists also have a duty to protect press freedom through ethical and responsible journalism. To the IFJ and WAJA, I urge you to continue as you did in the past to promote greater professionalism among journalists in Africa. I advocate such programs of the past that promoted training, self-regulation, and a high sense of media accountability. What African journalism also needs as we confront new challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic and deepening socioeconomic problems is what some have advocated: public interest journalism, which thrives on objective, non-partisan, and fair coverage, as well as research-based, informed, and critical analysis of the news. In other words, issue-oriented journalism that seeks to promote the common good and our shared values. Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your indulgence and ask for your merciful pardon if I was overstayed at the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cabral Blay Amihir. Ladies and gentlemen, without any delay, shall we now welcome the President of the Ghana Journalists Association, the host country, to give us his welcome address, Mr. Afel Moni.
His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Akufo, Ambassador Cabral Blay Amihir, Chairman for Education, Minister of Information, Honorable Kojo Ponkrumah, Chairman of the National Media Commission, Yabuedu Aibuafo, Member of the National Media Commission, and former FAJ Steering Committee member, Bright Kwame Bleu, Ambassador Salah Hamad from the AU, President of the Federation of African Journalists, my boss in Africa, members of the Steering Committee of the Federation of African Journalists, members of the Diplomatic Corps, leaders of African Journalists Unions, heads of media institutions, our iconic investigative journalist, Anas Arimiyao Anas, colleague journalists, Reverend Francis Dr. Nyakun, Head Pastor, End Time, Revival Center, Assemblies of God, Pastor Arion Hagan, the pastor of the media in Ghana, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to spray a perfume of welcome on you all for attending the opening ceremony of the African Journalists Leaders Conference here in Accra. A special welcome goes to our colleagues from member African countries who had to endure hellish travel experiences in their bid to get here. Even Ambassador Salah Hamad, a top AU diplomat, was not spared diplomatic embarrassment on this trip from Addis Ababa to Accra. We very much cherish your presence, which is far more important than the magnitude of frustration you have gone through. Ambassador Chairman, we note with considerable interest that the Accra African Journalists Leaders Conference coincides with a raging debate on the state of press freedom in Ghana generally, and a strident assessment specifically of our President's commitment to same. All this is healthy for a robust democracy in which viewpoint diversity must be manifestly venerated and not maliciously castigated. This is our take. The annual Press Freedom Index is an empirical tool to measure the degree of media freedom in Ghana, which is currently ranked 3rd in Africa and 30th in the world. To say that Ghana's media system is free of challenges is to play the ostrich, and to claim that the same system is deficient of freedom is to stretch the truth. Indeed, the country's universally acclaimed credentials vindicate the rectitude of the choice of the Steering Committee of the Federation of African Journalists to hold its first major conference in Ghana after the Khartoum Congress 3 years ago. In the broader African context, democratic toleration is on the wane and naked impunity is on the rise. And this cycle of impunity breeds into the attacks of scandalous frequency on journalists, over which FAJ is gravely concerned. Our concern is predicated on the principle that a threat to press freedom anywhere is a threat to press freedom everywhere. All journalists everywhere must therefore rise up and fight hard against the inclement conditions which inhibit their work and imperil their lives. A Malian proverb says, "No one finger can wash the face." Contextually, journalists alone cannot and should not wage the fight against the calcifying cancer of impunity on the continent. Civil society, democracy lovers, traditional rulers, reverend ministers, revered imams, and media consumers must all join forces with the media to win the war against impunity. We are fully aware that journalism is risk-prone, but not cash-rich profession. However, the vertiginous rise in the number of at-risk journalists in Africa, the lion-like savagery and animalistic abuse of their rights are totally unacceptable. In this regard, we welcome the policy direction of the Biden administration to sharpen its focus on press freedom and the preponderance of threats against journalists in the world, including our dear continent, Africa. Well before this policy direction was articulated, the media in Ghana enjoyed rock-solid support from the American embassy. This support must be replicated in every part of the continent. Another issue which should be tackled with all-absorbing attention and all-consuming seriousness is the precarious working conditions of journalists in Africa. In instances too numerous to cite, even the slave wages of journalists are in arrears. And in scenarios tearfully painful to recall, some journalists are not paid at all. A famous Ghanaian parlance has it that man must eat or man must survive. And this survival instinct explains, but does not justify, the proneness of any poorly paid, heavily owed, or zero-salaried journalists to be cheaply bought, easily compromised, or willfully become a chief of mischief. The Director General of GBC, Professor Amin Ahassan, rightly asserted yesterday during a case call by 5 leaders that poorly paid journalists are a threat to democracy. Simply put, we cannot reverse the democratic retrogression on the continent or deodorize the democratic stench in parts of the continent characterized by the various of third termism and military coup if journalists are not sufficiently empowered pocket-wise to be diligent to their mandate and dutiful to the public. At this stage, we salute all journalists in Africa who defy daunting odds and exhibit insoluble will, manifest unconquerable spirit, and exemplify scrupulous regard for the principles of the profession as they hold people in positions of power to account, expose acts of corruption, keep the public meaningfully informed, and oil the wheels of democracy. Your inestimable sacrifice will not be in vain. Once again, Akwaba, you are warmly welcome, and may our God of heaven bless our efforts to shape a better media system on the continent of Africa. I thank you.
I think the president of the GGA deserves a bigger round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, humbly, I would like to acknowledge some of those who are here with us, with your permission, sir. We have with us here Her Excellency, the U.S. Ambassador to Ghana, Stephanie Sullivan. Her Excellency, the Colombian Ambassador to Ghana, Claudia Tebe Quintero, here with us as well. Your Excellency, we also have our own chairman of the National Media Commission, Mr. Yao Boedu Ayeboafo, here with us. We have with us the ITUC Africa General Secretary, Mr. Kwesi Duamankwa, also here with us. Present here is Ambassador Salah Hamad, who is from the African Union. Mr. President, again, the President of the Federation of African Journalists, Mr. Sadiq Ibrahim Ahmed, is also here. Shall we acknowledge him as well? Thank you very much. Having said that, I'll now invite Mr. Sadiq Ibrahim Ahmed, who is the President of the Federation of African Journalists, to give us a brief statement.
His Excellency Nana Akufo, Addo, President of Republic of Ghana. Excellency Hon Kojo Obong, Minister of Information. Ambassador Karbal Amihia, former President of Ghana Journalists Association, and Waja. Ambassador Salah Hamad, representative of African Union. And Brother Yunus Mujahid, the President of International Federation of Journalists, who will be joining us virtually. Brother Roland Efel Moni, President of Ghana Journalists Association. First of all, allow me on behalf of the Federation of African Journalists, FAJ, and all African journalists to thank you, Mr. President, and your government, as well as the people of Ghana, for warm welcome and hospitality. Thank you also, Mr. President, for sparing your valuable time to be with us here. When we touched the soul of Ghana and this beautiful city, Accra, we felt the spring spirit of Africa's great sons, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Patrice Lumumba, Nelson Mandela, and all the leaders of African liberation. Dear comrades, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is happening in the right place and at the right time, because since time immemorial, Ghana has always been on the information highway. It is therefore only fitting that African journalists leaders should be sitting here and as we discuss issues pertaining to the future of journalism. The meeting comes at a critical time for the world and Africa, and many countries grapple with the effect of coronavirus pandemic. We, the FAJ family, have not been spared towards of its impact. In the past year, we lost to Corona many colleagues, some of whom should have been with us at this meeting today. Join me observe a moment of silence in memory of our colleagues Stanis Nikomedi, the General Secretary of the Journalists Union of Democratic Republic of Congo, and the member of the Fight Steering Committee, Comrade Foster Donogozi, veteran journalist, Secretary General of Zimbabwe Union of Journalists, At-Tayyib Mustafa, member of Sudanese Journalists Union, and the former Director General of Sudan National Radio and Television Corporation. May their souls rest in eternal peace. Dear comrades, last June, the Federation of African Journalists FAJ launched a report highlighting worrying trends for the media industry as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. The result come from a survey conducted among FAJ members. 20 unions representing 57% of FAJ affiliates in Africa participated in this survey. The report shows that the African government's response to economic impact of the pandemic had very negative impact on the media sector and looked take measure to support media works. In particular, unions singled out granting measures which is prevented journalists from doing their job. They amended from failure in many places to recognize journalists as front-line workers who had critical role to play during the pandemic. Only 20% of governments have made inventions that specifically addressed the crisis of a new media. Dear colleagues, during this crisis, African journalists have played a critical role in creating awareness about the pandemic and the safety measures that people need to take to prevent spread. Dear brother, comrades, colleagues, during this conference, we will discuss very important issues, including the achievement and challenges of African journalism, the working condition of African journalists, and the future of journalists' union in Africa, and labor solidarity under a new normal of COVID-19. Your Excellency, the present crisis and the future call for a new thinking and new strategic alliances between the trade unions and the governments, as well as the regional and international organizations. We need to create a new platforms for collaboration and under which we should be more than partners than adversaries, with a clear respect for the boundaries that define our different roles in society. We trust the government of Ghana can over leadership role and help the define the path for governments should take ensure that journalism and labor solidarity emerge from this crisis stronger and more resilient. Your Excellency, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Your kind attention, and I wish you fruitful declarations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sadiq Ibrahim Ahmed, who is the President of the Federation of African Journalists. This event is being broadcast live on GTV, that's the Ghana television, and also being translated into 3 languages. So in case you do not understand any language that will be used on this platform, for those who want the translation to be done in English, on your consoles, and I believe everybody has one in front of them, you press 1 if you want the translation in English. If you want the translation in French, you press 2. And if you want the translation to be done for you in Portuguese, you press 3. And everyone will understand whatever conversations take place here this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we will turn our attention to the screen right now as we are joined by Mr. Yunus Majid. He is the president of IFJ, and he is just about to give us a solidarity message. We'll turn our attention to the screen right now.
Bonjour. Son Excellence, Monsieur le Président, chers camarades, chers collègues, honorables responsables des institutions africaines, chers amis Ibrahim Siddiq, président de la Fédération africaine des journalistes, je tiens au nom de la Fédération de votre conférence très importante. Et on le sait très bien, on est en train de vivre des moments très... Mais comme vous le savez, nous, surtout aussi en Afrique, on a organisé une très importante et grande réunion avec nos affiliés de la Fédération. Et devant cette crise, les sociétés, toutes les sociétés, ils sont revenus à la presse classique. Ils ont essayé de voir... Et on a travaillé sur une plateforme au niveau mondial, on a continué à travailler sur ce projet pour une presse de qualité. Parce que on doit offrir, nous, en tant que journalistes, mais aussi toutes les autres médias, ou les médias, une presse de qualité pour la société. Une presse de qualité ne peut pas être produite par des amateurs, peut-être qu'ils peuvent le faire, mais c'est surtout le professionnalisme qui prime. Et c'est pour cela que la deuxième chose que je veux transmettre, c'est que c'est une responsabilité des journalistes, c'est une responsabilité des syndicats et des associations des journalistes, mais aussi c'est une grande responsabilité des médias et des médias de qualité. On ne peut pas imaginer la démocratie, la transparence, une presse d'investigation et une presse de qualité. La deuxième chose, et c'est la question de la protection des journalistes. Malheureusement, toutes les années, nous, à la Fédération internationale des journalistes, il reste une liste, pas simplement des journalistes qui ont été agressés, emprisonnés, etc., mais aussi assassinés. Ça, c'est un fléau qu'on est en train de subir et c'est une question aussi très importante qu'on doit soumettre aujourd'hui et on doit continuer à lutter contre l'impunité. On a fait tout nos possibles et on va continuer à le faire, mais s'il n'y a pas de participation ou de contribution des gouvernements, des instances internationales, ce fléau va continuer. La question de la protection des journalistes pour nous est une question primordiale parce qu'on ne peut pas travailler si on n'est pas protégé. Et la protection vient pas simplement des lois, mais aussi de l'application des lois, parce qu'on sait qu'il y a des lois dans tous les pays, mais c'est l'application des lois, c'est l'investigation quand il y a des agressions contre les journalistes, quand il y a des assassinats. Et malheureusement, ça ne se fait pas comme il faut. C'est pour cela que cette question pour nous est cruciale et très importante, parce que le journalisme, c'est l'investigation. Les journalistes doivent être dans tous les coins du monde pour essayer d'informer d'une manière claire les médias et les sociétés. Et aussi la question aussi des conditions du travail des journalistes. Parce qu'ils font partie des travailleurs, mais ils doivent aussi jouir de toutes les qualités possibles pour faire bien leur travail. Et on sait très bien qu'il y a avec nous d'autres responsables des syndicats au niveau africain et je crois que c'est une question aussi qu'on doit soumettre aujourd'hui et on doit continuer à lutter parce que la question des conditions de travail des journalistes et je dois terminer pour dire que le Covid nous a enseigné beaucoup de choses très importantes. C'est qu'on ne peut pas remplacer le journalisme. Le journalisme est primordial, crucial pour toutes les sociétés. Et c'est une responsabilité collective, c'est une responsabilité aussi politique. On est là pour exprimer toutes nos solidarités en tant que fédération. Nos affiliés et nos syndicats sont les plus actifs et je les salue et je salue tous les participants à cette conférence et merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Younis Mujahid Umar Farouk Osman, President of IFJ, for giving us that solidarity message. Let's acknowledge him one more time with a round of applause. Without any delay, shall I now invite you, General Secretary of ITUC Africa, Mr. Kwesi Duamankwa, to give us your brief solidarity message. Thank you.
Thank you, MC. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Nana Addo Akufo, Excellency, Chairman for the occasion, Cabral, Bulami here, Honorable Minister of Information, Kojo Oponkuma, Your Excellency, Ambassador Salah Ahmad, President of the Federation of African Journalists, distinguished invited guests. It's a pleasure to see all of you here today. And I'd like to salute FAJ for their courage in organizing this conference in these uncertain times. The challenges that many of you went through to get here speak to the extraordinary times we are living in. What started as a health crisis quickly moved into an economic crisis as COVID-19 disrupted the global economy. The impacts of this pandemic have been well documented, and workers, including journalists, have suffered loss of employment and income. They have been particularly hard hit on this continent because of the weakness or absence of social protection facilities around Africa. Long before COVID-19, the working conditions of journalists were already bad, and the partnership between organized labor, including journalist unions and employers, was under severe strain. When the pandemic struck, many workers were already very vulnerable. And in some places, the individual desperation caused by the pandemic has been exploited to break labor solidarity. Media workers who have become essential workers in the fight against this pandemic have been among the victims of this exploitation. For journalists, the impacts have been particularly brutal because in the pre-pandemic period, nearly 70% of working journalists in Africa were freelance. This means that there is an increase of informal economy workers in the media industry in Africa. In many cases, journalists work without contracts and with unpredictable earnings. It is actually a sad truth that in Africa, journalists are among the most vulnerable members of society and may well be among the most poorly paid professionals in the continent. Such a status quo is not healthy for quality journalism and the promotion of media freedom. Decent pay and credible quality journalism cannot be separated. And in general, that applies to all workers. Everybody deserves equitable pay that is commensurate with their contribution to the production process. And I can say that workers are not greedy, and labor unions only seek a fair balance of returns. African journalists do well under extremely difficult conditions. Through their bravery and sacrifices, they have contributed to the development of more open societies and somewhat accountable leadership. They deserve all the support from governments, from business, and from solidarity support groups to build their professional capacity and resilience. A major step will be to help journalist unions develop the internal capacities to represent their members more effectively, to grow their membership and entrench the spirit of solidarity among them. Strategic alliances with civil society networks and labor movements can strengthen their advocacy, and journalists need to strive towards stronger journalist unions in Africa. Unusual times call for unusual responses. The COVID-19 crisis is one of such times, and it challenges established ways of approaching problems and calls for innovative responses to problems. We need to save jobs, to ensure that women are not marginalized in the current situation, that youth get jobs, and that low-wage earners are accorded adequate protection. In furtherance of all these, the International Trade Union Confederation has called for a new social contract to respond to the vulnerable situation of workers made worse by the pandemic. The main pillars of this new social contract are employment, and we look more to climate-friendly jobs with just transition. Rights, protection of labor rights with freedom of association and collective bargaining at their core. Social protection for all, with a call for a global fund in support for the weakest countries. Equality, covering among other things, gender pay gap and racial discrimination. And inclusion, to create room for all in the development process, and particularly to give hope to the youth as well as minorities. Above everything else, we need to get our economies up and running again. Media businesses need to recover, while at the same time making decent pay for journalists and other workers a priority. That calls for an honest partnership and engagement between journalists and their trade unions, governments, and news media organizations. African governments will be looking forward to you to put in place the policy incentives for media companies to hire more, while unions and media workers associations must explore the most optimal contributions between decent wages, more headcount, and productivity. Enterprise survival and growth is basic, but this should be tied to the well-being of those who make this happen. ITUC Africa and its affiliates are ready to explore with the Federation of African Journalists and its affiliates possible ways to defend decent pay for journalists and to ensure the protection of journalists' rights and to defend media freedom. Now is the time to rediscover and reclaim that common ground as we try to find our way out of the current crisis. Federation of African Journalists and all journalist unions and associations in Africa can count on ITUC Africa's solidarity support. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwesidu Amankwa. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to call a man who I dare say is awakened every morning by calls from journalists from all over the country seeking information and clarification on issues regarding government and government activities. This man, I'm sure, also speaks to journalists the last thing, even before he goes to bed. For 10 years, close to 10 years, this man was himself a practicing journalist, but he is a lawyer and a finance professional by training. Currently, And for more than 4 years now, in the second term, he's been the MP for Ofuasi, a UB constituency, and he is our Minister for Information. Let's welcome the Honorable Minister for Information, Kojo Ponkroma.
President of the Republic, Nana Addo Akufo, Ambassador Cabral Bliamihe, Chair of the occasion, representative of the African Union, members of the Diplomatic Corps, NMC Chair, President of the Federation of African Journalists, Sadiq Ibrahim Ahmed, DJ President Afilmoni, colleague journalists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to make these few remarks at the opening of this August conference of African journalist leaders here in Accra. I'm particularly elated that as you sought to host this conference in a place where free media is respected and journalism has played a key role in advancing the cause of the society, you chose Ghana. It bears testimony to the continuous effort that we make in living up to what some of our forebears fought for, a society in which liberalism within the framework of the rule of law is upheld. May Ghana continue to shine in this light. A gathering of this nature gives us an opportunity for deep reflection on developments in our industry. The theme for this year's gathering narrows our focus to, quote, building stronger unions to enhance journalism and media freedoms. Mr. President, a close examination suggests that this theme has two parts: building stronger unions to enhance media freedoms, and building stronger unions to enhance journalism. May I speak briefly to the subject of freedoms? The media landscape in Ghana and many African countries was previously characterized by the domination of state-owned media. Broadcasting was a state monopoly. Today, Ghana, for example, boasts of over 500 radio stations, over 140 television stations, hundreds of registered newspapers and publications, and our internet space is awash with scores of online audiovisual productions by several Ghanaians, broadcasting from home and abroad and expressing divergent, sometimes heated views on all matters of our daily lives. Ghana's people, or Ghanaians, freely agree and disagree with government, civil society groups, and even media today. Since the year 2020, your government, Mr. President, is implementing the Right to Information Law and has further introduced a number of support programs to assist journalists in their practice, including the Media Capacity Enhancement Program. These freedoms that Ghana and other African countries enjoy, however, have come after long years of struggle and ideological differences and must be guarded jealously. I have no doubt that in addition to the many voices that have stood for and fought for media freedoms, including the then lawyer Akufo, who happens to be President Akufo today, the media fraternity itself will, as it has always done, close ranks and preserve the freedoms that we enjoy today. For our colleagues who have joined us from other countries, it goes without saying that uniting to fight for and preserve the freedoms is a sine qua non for media growth and development. Though the odd, unfortunate, sporadic incidents of impunity against any journalist may not be the norm in Africa today, it must be condemned and addressed if it occurs anywhere. And now to journalism. Mr. President, one of the biggest threats to journalism is the infiltration into the industry of persons who use journalism as a cover to practice all sorts of unethical, unacceptable acts that are known to our industry. It must be of interest to us and our leaders in the industry to constantly set the standard on what is ethical and acceptable and be quick to uphold same while calling out boldly, without fear or favor, that which is not journalism but masquerades as such. If not done by we, the journalists ourselves, and our unions, it sets the stage for others to take us on and by effect undermine what is true journalism. The African proverb is that one nut not taken out sours the taste of the entire nut gel. Tied to this, Mr. President, is the need to support journalists with capacity building programs to ensure that our skill set, our ethical considerations, and professionalism are always upheld. This calls for regular investment by all stakeholders, including journalist unions, civil society groups, and even the state. Ghana's Media Capacity Enhancement Program, which we expect to roll out this year, may be a good model from which others can learn. And by so doing, we can contribute effectively in enhancing true journalism and preserving its hallowed role in the development of our nations and our continent. In conclusion, Mr. President, it is our hope that by the end of this conference, we would have had an honest, forthright introspection of our industry on the continent and arrived at ways through which we can achieve the twin objectives that we have set for ourselves during this conference, which is to build a stronger union to enhance media freedom and also to build a stronger union to enhance journalism. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, Minister for Information. Just before we get to the climax where the President will speak to us, we'll take a statement from the AU, and that will be done by Ambassador Salah Ahmad. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Minister of Information of the Republic of Ghana, Honorable Ministers and Members of Parliament from the Republic of Ghana present with us this morning, the Honorable Chairperson of the proceedings and the session of today, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, and allow me to recognize Her Excellency the Ambassador of the US and Her Excellency the Ambassador of Colombia, Distinguished President of the International Federation of Journalists, Distinguished President of the Federation of African Journalists, Distinguished President of the Ghana Journalist Association, Distinguished Secretary General for Africa of the ITUC, distinguished journalists from all corners of Africa, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly and respectfully observed. I bring you greetings from His Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and His Excellency, Commissioner Bankole Adeoli, Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security of the African Union Commission. We are quite honored and delighted to be invited to this important conference of the Federation of African Journalists, taking place here in this beautiful city of Accra. Allow me to begin by thanking His Excellency, his members of Cabinet, the entire government, and the lovely people of the Republic of Ghana for hosting this meeting and also for according us all kind of warm welcome and African hospitality since our arrival in this beautiful city of Accra. Indeed, as it has been mentioned earlier, there is no better place for this conference to take place than Accra. Accra, the birthplace of African Renaissance and African Pan-Africanism. And when we all come to this city of Accra, it is the only city out of our own countries where we feel home. And we feel that the dream of Nkrumah, of an Africa that is united, prosperous, and peaceful, will certainly come true. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, in the African Union Commission, we count heavily on our coordination and collaboration and partnership with the Federation of African Journalists that started as early as 2010. In fact, we felt closer to them, all journalists from all corners of Africa, when His Excellency, the late President of Ghana, Atta Mills, who was chair of or champion of the African shared values, instructed us then to closely work with FAJ. And FAJ was then introduced to the African Union through his good office. And since then, we have been, as African Union Commission, working very closely with this Federation of African Journalists, which represent more than 45 member states of our 55 member states. We hope the next meeting we come, we will hear that FAJ represent by then all 55 member states of our African continent. But let me quickly share with you the message I came all the way from Addis to deliver on behalf of the Commission in Addis Ababa. Message number one, we really hope, in addition to enlarging the representation and the network of this important organization, FAJ, we hope to see next time we come to your conference more gender representation. It's absolutely not true to say that African journalists are only men. Certainly, African women can also do well as journalists. So therefore, we really hope that this federation will bring more female representation to the table, because there's no bird and there's no aircraft will fly with one wing. Two wings are needed for any creature to fly. So please take this into consideration, because certainly the African women, they have a role to play in building the Africa that is prosperous, united, and peaceful. My second message, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Africa that we are all celebrating today is the Africa that is aiming to implement Agenda 2063, the blueprint for the development of the Africa we want, the Africa we need, and the Africa we deserve. And we therefore count heavily in your continental organization on you as journalists to lobby and to raise awareness about the existence of this Agenda 2063. So each and every African citizen, whether they have connection to internet, power or not, are aware of the existence of this important document. Because without the involvement of all Africans, we will not be able to proceed with the implementation fully the implementation of this Agenda 2063. Third, it is very important to note that Africa is a young continent. African youth are more than 65% of the population. So you have the role, my colleagues in this important or this distinguished and august body of FAJ, to groom and to continue building the legacy by bringing in and training more African young men and women to become good journalists that will contribute to building the Africa we want. So please keep in mind the role that could be played by the African youth in this process. When we speak about news, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, sadly, the mindset is always about bad news. It's about conflicts. It's about problems. It's about disputes. And without that, maybe the thinking is media will not be able to sell. But believe me, from the experience we have undertook in the African Union Commission, we have realized that our African people are also eager and hungry to receive good news about good stories that could also become examples to lead the way for the African people in their campaign to build the Africa that is united, prosperous, and peaceful. So please, as you focus on any news, try to reflect on good stories, on those who are government officials and doing very well, not corrupted and not even pretend to be corrupted. Reflect their stories so they can be good examples, so they can also lead the way for creating leadership as we go. My last message, Excellency, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, which is a message that we have been talking about almost on a daily basis, that if you are an African, you are the African Union. And because we are all Africans here, of course with the presence of our friends, our goal is to join hands to support the African Union Commission as your continental organization in its efforts to build the Africa that is united, prosperous, and peaceful. And with that, we thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, his government, and the people of Ghana for hosting the Secretariat of the African Continental Trade Agreement here in Accra. Please write about this achievement. Please write about the need for having free movement of persons, free movement of goods, free African passport, and free Africa that will be a better place to convince its youth from settling in African countries instead of dying in the Sahara and the Mediterranean Sea. Africa needs its youth. So please, let's try to encourage them to stay. Let's try to encourage them to think of better alternatives and opportunities within the continent. We will continue our partnership with FAJ. FAJ is a great organization that is advocating on behalf of the African journalists. And together, hands in hands, we will be able to build the Africa that we want and the Africa that we deserve. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Salah Hamad, for that message from the AU. Your Excellency, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with us here is Professor Kwame Nakwanse-Edu, Rector of the Ghana Institute of Journalism. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. We also have the President of Primpag here represented. Can we see you? Just give us a wave. Thank you very much. Let's acknowledge them with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. We have ACE investigative journalist Anas Aremiya Anas here with us. Thank you very much, Anas, for coming. We are grateful. Lawyer Samir Dako, also a journalist, is here with us. Samir Dako, thank you very much. Lawyer Tanko Ibrahim, also a journalist and a teacher of journalism, is also here. Let's see you. Linda Asanteje is the Vice President of the Ghana Journalists Association. She is here as well. Thank you very much. Mr. Suleiman Abrahima is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, and he is here with us. Of course, I've also seen Mr. Dan Afariaboa, the quiz master, also here with us. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we've gotten to the climax of this morning's event. The official opening address by the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency, Nana Addo Akufo Addo. Shall we give it? Ladies and gentlemen, the applause must be bigger than this. Thank you so very much. Please be seated now. Thank you.
Eminent clergy, the chairperson, esteemed journalist and diplomat, Ghana's Minister for Information, representative of the African Union, the General Secretary, Africa Chapter of the International Trades Union Confederation, President, Executive, and members of the Federation of African Journalists, the President, Executives, and members of the Ghana Journalists Association, Chairperson of Ghana's National Media Commission, the Dean and members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow Africans, ladies and gentlemen. I'm grateful to the African Federation of Journalists and the Ghana Journalists Association for the invitation to open this year's African Journalist Leaders Conference, which is being held in our vibrant stations, even when the Constitution of Ghana's Fourth Republic had given that right. The great global changes of the 1990s led to a renewal of democratic aspirations in Africa, which lay at the heart of the free. The Ghanaian people, just as they had demonstrated in the drive towards independence, showed again their determination to live in conditions of freedom and democracy. In 1992, by an overwhelming margin in a referendum, they approved the adoption of the Constitution of the Fourth Republic, which set up the institutions of a liberal democratic state, operating on the basis of the separation of powers, with express guarantees of fundamental human rights, including, naturally, freedom of thought and expression. Indeed, the diversity and free flow of news and information are fundamental to the healthy workings of any democracy. I thank you, the journalists of this country and of this continent, for keeping our governments accountable. It is the media, above all, that has encouraged our people to come more and more discerning, vocal, and questioning as a civic public. We have recently had a good example of how the media can be a force for good, and that was manifested in how we've been dealing with COVID-19. Without a lively press that worked hand in hand to deliver not only the news about the outbreak of COVID-19, but also to communicate the strategies and public health messages that have been put in place around the continent, we would be telling a very different story today. Journalists did and continue to do a yeoman's job in the public education of the citizenry about COVID-19 and vaccination efforts across the continent. Journalists in this instance were and are partners to government across the continent, and through this joint effort have helped save the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of African citizens. And I pay homage to the efforts of our journalists. There are three other matters of continental and national significance for which I appeal for the committed partnership of government and the media. The fight against terrorism and violent extremism, which are threatening the stability of all regions of our continent. The fight against climate change, including the preservation of the integrity of our environments and the sanctities of our water bodies. And thirdly, the fight against the illicit flow of funds from our continent, which the Thabo Mbeki Commission estimated conservatively, currently, at 80 billion United States dollars a year. These are all menaces to the health, progress, and stability of our nations and continent. We should stand shoulder to shoulder in ridding our continent and nations of them. I believe a vibrant and unfettered media is the most effective way to hold government and society to the highest standards of honesty, self-discipline, and delivery. Indeed, on 2nd August 2001, in the government of that outstanding Ghanaian statesman, His Excellency John Akufo, the second president of Ghana's Fourth Republic. A historic victory was won in the struggle of the Ghanaian people for liberty, and especially for freedom of expression by the repeal of the criminal libel law. This brought to an end more than a century-old regime of colonial laws repressive of free expression. I'm proud of the modest role I played in the process of repeal of the criminal libel law. As the Attorney General who piloted the repeal through Parliament, I was also responsible for the discontinuation of the then pending prosecutions under the criminal libel law of notable Ghanaian journalists Tommy Thompson, Kofi Kumson, and Eben Kwaku for publications against personalities of the then government. The repeal of the criminal libel law has had a very positive impact on the development of the Ghanaian media, freeing it from unnecessary self-censorship and promoting a robust and critical media culture. In the process, it has contributed to the growth of a vibrant media that has won Ghana the reputation of having one of the most media-friendly and liberal climates on the continent. It has also contributed significantly to the deepening of democracy in our country, enhancing public accountability as a strategic goal of public policy. Even as one of the public figures most persistently vilified in sections of the Ghanaian media, who ironically was a principal actor in the repeal of the law, I continue to insist that its repeal was necessary in the public interest in our emerging democracy. I maintain that I prefer a boisterous, even reckless media to a supine one. As President of the Republic, I have seen to the passage of the Right to Information Act, which is meant to give effect to Article 21. Several preceding administrations had shied away from taking such a step. The combination of all these have meant that the Ghanaian citizen, through the presence of a dynamic media, is able to give boldly and freely his or her feedback on policies and programs of government. Civil society groups are able to interrogate fearlessly government actions and positions, compare them to best global practices, and offer views and critiques aimed at complementing the efforts of government. And the political opposition is able to raise dissent openly, canvass for alternative viewpoints, and by so doing, offer our citizens alternatives to consider on all key issues of our national discourse. Nonetheless, we recognize the need for training, critical engagement by society with our media, self-regulation, and insistence on high media ethics and journalistic standards by media houses, practitioners, and their organizations, as part of the process of building a culture of high standards of professionalism in the Ghanaian media. This has been largely accepted as the means of enhancing the quality of media freedom in Ghana. As we gather in Accra for this Leaders' Conference, it is still disheartening to note that though proven to be a catalyst in spurring the advancement of societies in the 21st century, we still have several countries that frown on or even criminalize free speech. On a day like this, it is also important to consider some of the emerging challenges to media freedom. One of them is what constitutes an attack on media freedom. It cannot be right, no matter where in the world, the journalists are physically attacked or prevented from doing their work. Once that happens, it is an attack on media freedom, and it must be roundly condemned by all. As George Orwell rightly puts it, and I quote, "Freedom of the press, if it means anything at all, means the freedom to criticize and oppose," unquote. However, there seems to be an emerging narrative which is being proffered by some in Ghana that critiquing the work of a journalist constitutes an attack on media freedom. That certainly cannot be described as an attack on media freedom. Having the freedom to criticize and oppose should also mean that the media is ready to accept and work with criticisms of its work by the citizenry or officialdom. That, for me, is one of the surest ways of improving the public discourse of our respective countries, and we should all strive towards realizing this. This conference should also seek to address the phenomena of misinformation campaigns and fake news, which sometimes, unfortunately, are propagated by some in the media. The tendency to report on only one side of a story and pass judgment on it, without wanting to learn or give a fair amount of reportage to the other side, stifles the truth. The media should only be concerned about reporting the facts and should not lend themselves to being bought or being used to destroy the reputation of others. The media has immeasurable power to build up the confidence and values of our societies and their institutions, and therefore ought to be assisted in discharging their duties at all times. I appeal to media practitioners on the continent to take a second look at the immense power they wield and the responsibility they owe their societies and their peoples, and ensure that they do not sacrifice integrity and the future of our societies on the altar of an instant scoop or ill-considered publication. The Rwanda Genocide in 1994 presents probably the best example of the calamity that can befall a country when the media is oblivious or chooses to ignore this particular sacred role. In Rwanda, a radio station became a catalyst for fueling the genocidal atrocities in which 800,000 people were tragically slaughtered. Although the country has picked itself up under the strong leadership of President Paul Kagame, there is no doubt that many Rwandans continue to suffer from the trauma. African journalists and media practitioners and organizations must not and cannot take the national cohesion of our countries and their stability for granted. As was proven in Rwanda, all it takes is for a radio station to broadcast a few provocative and ethnocentric catchphrases to alter completely the course of a nation's history. Ladies and gentlemen, the government I lead remains committed to empowering the citizen, media, and civil society so we can all play our roles in realizing our vision of building a progressive and prosperous Ghana, a Ghana beyond aid. As President of Ghana, I assure you that the Ghanaian people will continue to exercise their right to free expression to the very end because of their determination to build a free, open society with accountable governance, no matter the cost. Once again, I thank the African Federation of Journalists for honoring Ghana with this event, and I wish you a successful conference. May God bless Mother Africa and us all, and may God bless our homeland Ghana and make her great and strong. I thank you for your attention.
A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana. Addo, Akufo. Thank you very much. Please be seated. For those of you who may have missed the news, let me announce to you that over the weekend, the Council of the University of Cape Coast conferred a Doctor of Philosophy degree in educational leadership on His Excellency, the President, Addo Akufo. A round of applause. It was in recognition of the President's leadership and support for the educational sector in Ghana. And so I think he deserves another round of applause for that, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to acknowledge Madame Addo Afari, a veteran journalist, former GJA president, and a columnist. She's here with us. Thank you very much, former president of the GJA. Nana Yar'Adua is the General Secretary of the CPP. The CPP is Nkrumah's political party, and she's here, Nana Yar'Adua. Thank you very much. Mr. Bright Bleu is also a member of the National Media Commission. Thank you very much. And of course, Latif Abu. The members of the high table here and the members of the steering committee of the Federation of African Journalists, as well as we humbly invite Your Excellencies, please remain seated. After the group picture, sessions will begin after the tea break. After the picture is taken, please, the rest of us remain seated, and those who